Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the Google Pixel 2 and see how this device holds up in 2021. Now, I've talked about this device a lot. I've reviewed it, compared it, all that good stuff. And I think ever since the Pixel 4a came out, this device has been on my mind so much. I don't know why. It's just like such a beautiful phone. And when I compare the 4a to the Pixel 2, I found out that there were a lot of similarities and there still are a lot of reasons to pick up a Pixel 2 in some ways. Now, if you want to pick it up, I guess I'll leave one link down below, but I'll also leave a couple other phones that are, recommend this year. You can also get them from cheapphones.co, which is my website. Either or, you're helping support the channel at the same time. Now, on the front of the Pixel 2, we do have that 5-inch AMOLED display, and it's a full HD panel, 1080p, and I really don't think it's a bad panel. I think it has so much bezel on it, though. It's like crazy how much bezel is on this thing, that this design is pretty outdated in that sense. I really don't think it's like a bad panel, but because it does have, even though it does have like that front-facing speaker setup, it really doesn't look too good in this day and age, but it does kind of come back in a couple of other areas. So keep that in mind. It's not an end-all be-all, but that is something that I'm not really too happy about on this specific panel. Now, we do have USB Type-C on the bottom of this phone, which is great. And on the back, we have that plastic back with that fingerprint sensor and a little kind of like clear plastic kind of glass thing up top. And we have that single camera setup on the back as well. Now, feeling this phone in the hand, it doesn't feel like a cheap phone. And again, like when you look at today's phones that we have, devices like the Galaxy S20, the iPhone 12 Pro, these type of phones, you're going to feel like you're having not as good or as premium of a device as those ones. But I will say, when you feel this device and you do feel something like the Pixel 4a or even the Pixel 5, you kind of get the same feeling to it. So you have to keep in mind that this phone came out in 2017, so it isn't the latest phone. It came out 4 years ago, so I'm not expecting this thing to do that great. So in the body standpoint, I can kind of give it some slack, but I really do think the display isn't that bad. It doesn't feel super cheap in the hands. And I think because of some other areas on this phone as well, it kind of makes up for it in my opinion. Now let's go and hit on the cameras that pretty much covers up. In the body standpoint, the Pixel 2 has that single camera setup on the back, a single 12.2 megapixel lens. And what I can tell you about this camera, as I've said before, this camera, just the whole entire Pixel lineup, has had killer cameras probably since the start. Like since the original Pixel, they've pretty much had the best cameras of every single year. But I feel like, as I said before, just like with the Pixel 2 XL video, the biggest problem that we had with these type of devices, especially a couple years later, is that we didn't get that extra camera setup. We didn't get a telephoto lens or an ultra-wide sensor. At this time, Apple had already released a phone before, like a year before, that had a double camera setup. And then eventually with the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 10, those also had, double camera setups as well. And I feel like Google kind of was left out in that sense, and they didn't even put a dual camera setup on their device until the Pixel 4. So they were kind of behind. I will tell you though, on the flip side, the quality of these cameras were really good. Google, even if they only have one camera, they kill it in the software. That's why phones like the Pixel 4 and the Pixel 5 have such great cameras at such cheap price tags, even though they don't have the most camera sensors, because they kill it on the software side. And it's the same exact case here. The Pixel 2, in my opinion, will probably do you justice when it comes down to the way the camera looks, the way the photos look. It is lacking in, higher intensive frame rates, so no 4K at 60. You can do 4K at 30, which I think is great. But like I said, no 4K at 60 on the front 8 megapixel sensor. Only 1080p at 30 on the front as well. That's kind of another limiting factor. We already have 4K at 60. We've been having it for a couple years now. And if you don't have 4K at 60, the quality is going to go lower, and it's just not looking too good right now for this phone on the front camera. The back camera as well, the lack of 4K at 60 isn't that great, but I think the quality of that camera definitely makes up for it. So I would probably rate the Pixel 2 in 2021 probably around a 6 out of 10. It's lacking camera features, but the software is great, so it really does make up for it. So I think in the camera standpoint, that's pretty much how I would cover it up. Now moving on, I think the best and probably the main reason to recommend a Pixel 2 in 2021 would honestly be the software. The Pixel 2 originally started off with Android Oreo. We are able to get upgraded to Android 11, and the Android 12 developer beta came out. I don't think the Pixel 2 was supported, but either or, it got many years of software support, which I'm really happy with. I'm glad, Google did that. But here's the other thing. It has so much custom ROM support behind this thing that even 2 to 3 years, even 5 years from now, you're still going to be getting software support one way or another, mostly because this thing is pretty easy to root. It's pretty easy to ROM. There's not a lot of stuff you have to do with it, and it's just a very basic, way of just prolonging the life of this device. There's only a couple other devices that get this type of longevity in terms of custom ROMs, some OnePlus devices, some super early Samsung devices, and this device also fits in that criteria. So you can unlock the bootloader, root and custom ROM this thing, and you are going to be good to go. And that is a humongous reason why I would recommend picking up a Pixel 2. That is probably one of the main reasons and only reasons, to be honest. I would recommend going up to something like a Pixel 4a. It's still a budget phone, but I think it's better than the Pixel 2 in so many other ways. But this device, in terms of the custom ROM capability, is a humongous plus, and that is a huge reason why I like it. This thing, on the other hand, has a 2700 mAh battery, which isn't super small. It isn't like the smallest thing ever, but it is kind of strange that Google kind of put kind of a smaller battery in this thing. We already had like 3000, 3400 type of milliamp-hour batteries at that time, but I think it's okay. The battery life, because the software isn't super crazy, the battery life kind of makes up for it in some sense. So in terms of that, I think the battery life is okay, but that software is probably a big plus in my opinion. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Now, hitting on the performance and ending it off with the performance, this device has that Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 chipset, octa-core CPU, and Adreno 540 GPU, and 4GB of RAM on every single model that this phone came out with, which were 2 different models. Now, what I can tell you about the performance side of things is that this device overall, in my opinion, does a pretty decent job at the chipset and the RAM that it has inside of it. I think for 2017 Android phone with 4GB of RAM, it's really not that bad of amount of RAM. I think you're probably going to have an okay experience in that front, but I think when it comes down to the day-to-day tasks, you're going to have a pretty decent time with it. For basic tasks, it's kind of hard to just compile everything at once, but for pretty basic tasks, if you're just, calling people, you're texting people back and forth, you're sending photos, you're going on Snapchat or stuff, you're going to be perfectly fine in that sense. Most phones, almost every single phone I talk about in this sense, will pretty much be able to handle it. It's not really that anything like crazy. Taking it up a notch, if you go and do pretty, okay medium style apps, such as photo editing, maybe doing a lot of photos at one time, maybe you're editing Word documents on your device and you're doing maybe some split screen multitasking, those type of things are probably going to be a little bit slower on your device. And especially with only the 4GB of RAM, you're probably going to run into some problems in RAM management too. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But going up to the heavier intensive things like heavier intensive gaming and maybe some huge video editing capability, I think this phone, that's kind of where it struggles in the most, especially in 2021 because of the Android 11 software. Maybe on Android Oreo is great, but in this time, it's probably going to run into some issues there, especially that RAM management portion. Because the 4GB of RAM, it's definitely not going to do it too well. Games and apps have only been getting bigger and bigger, so you're probably going to run into some problems there. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. So that pretty much covers up pretty much everything that I wanted to hit on in this device. And to kind of sum up this video and say answer the question, should you go and buy this device in 2021? Well, this is what I'll tell you. I think the Pixel 2 still has a lot of things going for it. It's really not that bad of a phone, even though it's 4 years old. It really isn't that old for a Google stock Android type of device, and I think that's one of the best things about this phone. The software, like I mentioned, is one of the biggest reasons why I would recommend buying this phone. I think the display is okay. I think this thing on the front doesn't really look too good. I think it really is kind of hindering the way it looks, especially when you compare this thing to even the Pixel 4a. I mean, this thing doesn't look too good, to be honest, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal. And if you don't care about it personally, then it really doesn't matter. I'm glad this thing got USB-C on the bottom. I'm glad this thing doesn't really feel super cheap. So those are some pretty big advantages for this thing. On the flip side though, the camera on the back is pretty decent. The camera on the front though really isn't my favorite. It is a little choppy. It doesn't look that great, and only 1080p on the front. That's kind of another area that I'm not really too fond of. But other than that, I think if you get this thing and you custom ROM it, those are some huge things that I would recommend doing on this device. You're going to have an extremely good time with it for the most part for the price tag. Like I said, if this thing came out in this day and age, it probably wouldn't be the best thing ever. But the fact that this thing is quite a bit old, it's depreciated, it has, custom ROM support, those are some big reasons why, somebody would want to buy this phone. Other than that, I would highly recommend picking up something like the Pixel 4a or the Pixel 5 if you can spend that much money. But regardless, if you can't, getting a phone like the Pixel 2, I think in 2021 is going to get you an overall okay experience. And I think for the price tag, it's actually not a bad pickup. So that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys get hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly, everything else, every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.